Question. I only had one such mystical experience. How do I speed it up? I feel like I'm behind on being spiritually awakened. Okay, so this was asked in connection with a video where I talk about mystical experiences, which I actually do in quite a few videos. So I understand where the question is coming from, because obviously we all well, you can put it this way. When you look at spiritual people, there are some people who have had a mystical experience and they are aware of it. And there are some people who either haven't had a mystical experience or they are not really aware of it. They're not aware of what it was. And so what happens to many spiritual people is perhaps you even had mystical experiences when you were a child. But at some point you find a spiritual teaching or organization and you start doing a spiritual practice. And at some point you have your first conscious mystical experience. And at that point you have a big contrast between the mystical experience, which is outside your normal awareness, and then your normal state of consciousness. And often it feels like a great shock. I mean, it can really feel like disorienting because the mystical experience feels very real. And all of a sudden you're wondering whether your normal experience is real, which you have often believed until that point. So I understand that, especially when people have psychological issues that make their life difficult, they're suffering psychologically. Then when you have the mystical experience where you experience probably more of a peace, you want to get back to that. You want to have more of that. And it becomes difficult to breach the gap between the mystical experience, the peace of that experience, and your normal state of mind. So I understand that you have a desire to speed it up. And you understand this feeling that you can be behind. Obviously, it's so long ago that I can barely remember it, but when I project myself back and see, I felt that way for quite a number of years after I found the spiritual path at 18. I had this sense of deficit. So how do I speed it up? Well, here you have to be very, very careful. What do you mean with speeding it up? Are you caught up in the modern consumer culture, that instant gratification, that you now realize, oh, there's a spiritual path, here's my credit card, give me results in 5 minutes? Because that's not going to work on the spiritual path. If you don't believe me, you can go to the Neo-Advaita teachers who will teach you, tell you you can snap your fingers and wake up. And if that works for you, fine. And if it doesn't work for you, you can come back and listen to what I'm saying here. Because the reality that most people find is that you have to engage in the systematic path. And you have to take the long view. So you have to find a valid spiritual teaching, a teaching that appeals to you. You have to find a spiritual practice. I, of course, have explained in many of my videos how I first found meditation movement. That didn't really do it for me. Then I found the Ascended Master teachings, and I started studying these teachings. And they have a lot of teachings about how you follow the spiritual path. I also started practicing invoking spiritual light. And those two things, the study and the practice, have really been the driving force on my path. And then I've been on that path, on the spiritual path now for 48 years. And of course, it didn't take me 48 years to get results. I'm not trying to say that you should think it'll take whatever many years to get results, because you will get results all along. It's just that you have to be careful you don't set yourself up with an impossible expectation. Because, and this is what I see with many of these people who buy into this concept of spiritual awakening, where they think that a spiritual awakening is an all or nothing thing. So you come to a point where now you have this epiphany, the clouds part, you hear a booming voice from heaven or however they see it. And now you are fully awakened, whereas before you were fully not awakened. And that's just not the way it works. It's a gradual path. You awaken in increments so that you can keep your bearings and maintain a sense of continuity in your sense of identity, a sense of who you are. And so, how do I speed it up? Well, you speed up your study and your practice, and you speed down your expectations of this instant results. Because the instant results are going to set you up for disappointment. And I've seen people go through this. It's basically what you can call the crash and burn syndrome. They find a spiritual movement, they start practicing, and then they don't get the results, so they practice even more. And they reorient their whole lives. I've seen people with meditation, for example. Their whole lives was geared towards taking these advanced meditation courses. And when they were not on a meditation course, they were spending most of their time meditating, so they didn't have time to have a job or have a family or do anything else in life. And it goes back to this Eastern ideal that the most spiritual person is the one who withdraws from society, goes into a cave or a monastery, and meditates 24 hours a day until he's awakened. And as I've said before, this is just not the ideal in the modern age, in the Aquarian age. It is that you integrate spirituality with everyday life, and that means that you walk a gradual path. You take responsibility for your life. If you have family or other obligations, you fulfill those obligations, but then you practice your spiritual practice as you have time and energy to do it. And then you accept that it's going to take some time to reach some bigger breakthroughs. But you will also, if you practice past, especially if you do what I've described in many of my videos, work on these subconscious selves, you will experience that every time you overcome some hang-up in your psychology, you feel more free, you feel more at peace, you feel more creative, you can express yourself more freely. And so the path has its own rewards along the way. But what I'm trying to say is, if you have this idea that I'm behind on being spiritually awakened, and I need to find a shortcut so that I can get there from here in 5 seconds. It's crash and burn syndrome. I mean, you're going to crash like so many other people have crashed. If you think you can do something that other people haven't been able to do, good luck. You don't need me. But I'm just advocating a more balanced approach here, where you adjust your expectations to what's realistic. I have given many of my videos. If you look at my channel, you look at my playlists, especially my breakthroughs on the spiritual path, I've given many videos where I outline the spiritual path you can follow. I also have my websites that you can look at, and really there are so many teachings there that if you take them and if you start practicing it, I think you will fairly quickly get results. But you have to realize that every little step you take is a result. It's a valuable result. And if you keep taking these smaller steps, there will also be bigger breakthroughs along the way. But exactly when that's going to happen for you individually, nobody can predict. At least I can't. And I don't think you can either, because we can't be objective about ourselves. So you just have to, like Jesus said, in your patience possess ye your souls. And one of the biggest problems that I have seen in the 48 years I've been on spiritual path is people who come in with this modern instant gratification attitude, and they don't have patience. And they actually lose their souls in it, in the sense that they're chasing the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow instead of taking one step at a time. But if you take one step at a time, you will get results. The other way, you probably won't. I'm not saying that you can't find exceptions, but for most people, taking one step at a time is much better than chasing the pot of gold.